All right, augmentation evoker enjoyers. What is the state of Aug right now, and what can we expect going into season 3? Well, there's some good news, some bad news, and some what the really. So let's get into it. When the tier sets were released, I think there was a lot of hype around Scalecommander, and rightfully so. You get the squad to pop out, you drop a bunch of bombs, you start disintegrating. It's cool, it's thematic, but there were some issues that popped up pretty quick. For one, you only pyred, which was where most of your damage came from when you were flying in Breath of Eons. This meant you wanted to stay in the air as long as possible, but how can you fly without going too far from your group? Well, initially you just flew into a wall. And if there wasn't a wall around, you had to Eons from 3-point range like Steph Curry, or you were kind of screwed and couldn't get all your pirates out. But don't fret, we found a solution. The solution was, and I kid you not, to Breath of Eons while RP walking, and your flight would be as slow as your walk. So you could essentially stay in one place and get off all your pyres before landing. But as much fun as forgetting to turn off RP walk and dying to a swirly was, Blizz decided they were going to fix it and now causes normal flight speed even when you're RP walking. But on the bright side, they limited the pyres and they increased the damage, meaning now you only had to fly for about 3 seconds if you wanted to get all your pyres out. Unfortunately, that didn't seem to be enough to solidify the Scalecommander playstyle. Currently, it's just not great. You get the squad for 30 seconds, but as soon as you land, that drops for 15, so you don't get the full 30 seconds. Also, I think the AI in the squad is bad or bugged because half the time they're just standing there doing nothing like most dev evokers I play with. On top of that, personal damage was lost from losing the tier set, and that really set back Scalecommander even further. Overall, if you're a Scalecommander enjoyer, you might be able to play it in some Mythic Plus a little. If they do change it so that you get the full 30 seconds of your squad, then it might be the Premier Mythic Plus spec. But for right now, it's close to Chrono, but Chrono is just better. Now, speaking of Chrono, that is our other hero tree and our other tier set. And that one must be fun to play, right? When the tier set dropped, I think a lot of people were confused by the Chronowarden tier set. What it does is inside temporal burst, which happens when you cast Tip the Scales, it increases Chrono Flame's target by 1, and it repeats 10% of the damage up to a specific amount. It's capped, but only in your cooldown, so only when you're in that temporal burst, which was kind of like okay, but why am I being encouraged to spam filler in my CDs when I need to be extending Ebb and Might as much as possible? And Chrono Flames doesn't do that. So initially, I think it was like, okay, we just don't have a 4-piece, since I'm not going to spam Chrono Flames over Eruption. But then it got a buff, increasing its target cap by 1, it increased the amount of damage it repeats up to 15%, and they raised the cap on the amount of damage that can be repeated, which is great. We love buffs. But now it did more damage than Eruption in AoE, meaning now you do want to spam Chrono Flame in your cooldowns more so than Eruptions. But how can you extend Ebb and Might without spamming Eruption? And so the dream of meme build was born, the Green Aug. Now this build was short-lived because it had some immediate flaws, but for a little bit it looked like a potential playstyle. Basically, you would move talents into Symbiotic Bloom in order to get to Dream of Springs, which removes Emerald Blossom CD, it increases its healing by 35%, and makes it cost 3 essence, but now it extends your Ebb and Might by 1 second per cast. So you would combine that with Scarlet Adaptation, which stores 20% of your effective healing to make your Chrono Flame deal more damage, and Ancient Flames, which made your Chrono Flame cast 40% faster after casting an Emerald Blossom. So you would weave Emerald Blossom between Chrono Flames while you were in your Temporal Burst window, and that way each Emerald Blossom would increase the damage because of Scarlet Adaptation, and it would also reduce the cast time of Chrono Flames by 40% due to Ancient Flames. Well, the first major flaw is Blossom still costs 375k mana on top of 3 essence. So if you rotated Chrono Flames and Emerald Blossom back and forth, you would yourself in about 10 Blossom casts, give or take, meaning you couldn't even rotate back and forth through one set of cooldowns without running out of mana. So you had to be very mana conscious all the time, and it broke down to casting more than 4 Emerald Blossoms a minute would eventually you, and obviously that's really bad because even though you get mana back from casting Chrono Flames, you still need the mana to cast it. So it was a very odd playstyle to try to work around, and there was these thoughts of, off healer Aug or replacing healer, but it never did that much healing, so it was kind of just spamming healing for spamming healing. And of course you don't want to be running out of mana, And when you're not in your temporal burst window, you still would eruption, so you still would need your eruption talents. It just didn't really make sense, but at the time the sims were putting it kind of ahead, so it looked like a potential playstyle. Thankfully, we had more sims come out, more theory crafting come out, and we found a build that moves away from that and is a better fit for just general playstyle and is simming well, and that is a mastery moats build. So you're going to move those talents out of Symbiotic Bloom and Dream of Springs and move that into moats, and you become a more damage buffing Aug, which is personally my favorite playstyle. I like buffing the damage. I feel like that's Aug at its essence. So with that switch, we are moving back into eruptions being the only way to extend Ebb and Might. So how it's going to work, how the playstyle is seemingly laid out so far, is that when you're in your temporal burst window, which you get from casting Tip the Scales, you are kind of activating that 4-piece, and if you have 2 or more targets, you are going to start spamming Chrono Flames and spending Essence Burst on eruptions. So you're going to be rotating a little bit back and forth. Every Chrono Flame, if you have, a lot of targets, it almost guarantees to get an Essence Burst. So it kind of becomes a Chrono Flame eruption, and back and forth. And if you are not in that temporal burst window, you just play like you normally did, just casting eruption to extend Ebb and Might, and you're not worrying about Chrono Flame, because outside of temporal burst, that 4-piece has no effect. So you're just erupting when you don't have that up. Now the 2-piece reduces the cooldown of Tip the Scales by a minute, which puts it at a minute cooldown. So you do have it up often, but like I said, when you don't have that buff up, you're just playing normal Aug, and when you have that up, you're spamming Chrono Flames and spending Essence Burst on eruptions. Now in single target, don't even worry, just play normal Aug. That 4-piece is AoE centered, where you're hitting more targets, you're repeating that damage on that target. Don't even worry about it in single target, just play normal Aug. Now, between the 2 hero trees, after all the different variations of flying into walls, RP walking, Dream of Springs, Emerald Blossom extending, it seems that Chronowarden is beating out Scalecommander in pretty much everything. It is close in Mythic Plus. If they fix the bugs or if they make the squad last longer, then you might see more Scalecommander in Mythic Plus than you would Chrono. And I think you might see it regardless of if they fix that or not, just because Scalecommander has always kind of been the better pug one. You have Eons up more often, you have a little bit more personal damage, you're not so focused on the groups. However, you would still play moats, so you still kind of want some mastery as Scalecommander. But I think that if you're not coordinated, Scalecommander might kind of edge out, because that's kind of how Chrono has been since this whole season, is that if you weren't playing coordinated, you weren't playing with solid people, your buff damage wasn't up to par, and it kind of just ended up with you not doing any damage. So even though Chrono seems to be the winner across the board for everything, I think you might see some more Scalecommander play, because it is really good in AoE. And like I said, if you're not lining things up, if you're not lining around pulls, then it might just be the safer option. Now let's talk stats. I mentioned before, we're pushing quite far into the mastery side of things. I'm guessing we're just going to go for as much as possible, with haste behind that and then crit following haste. Crit was typically quite a highly sought after stat for Chronowarden, but it's looking like double time isn't as valuable as before, or just isn't as valued as before. And that could change, but for right now, it looks like mastery is just greater than haste, and then haste is greater than crit. Even if you're playing Scalecommander, like I mentioned, you're going to want some mastery, so it's not going to be strictly crit and haste for Scalecommander either. Now this might change. We might see crit and haste for Chrono kind of balance out. It might be equal to each other, but right now it seems like mastery is just going to be our primary. Anything with mastery is what we want. Now let's talk about something else that's probably likely to get fixed very, very quickly, and that is 2-piece of Season 2 and 2-piece of Season 3 is an upgrade overall for the new Mythic tier. So provided last season's tier is Mythic, you're likely to keep your 4-piece from Season 2 until you get a couple of at least heroic tier pieces from Season 3, and then you're going to go 2 and 2. Now Chrono likes the 2-piece bonus a lot more than Scalecommander does, so you might swap at normal 2 and 2. So if you have 2 pieces from last season and then you get in 2 normal pieces of tier, you might swap there too, but you're gonna have to sim it. Again, this happened in this current season, where if you didn't have all Mythic, I believe that the 2-piece from last season, the Season 1, and 2-piece from Season 2 was an upgrade, but they fixed that pretty quickly as soon as it came out. So I'm assuming that this is also going to get fixed. But for right now, if it doesn't get fixed and you get 2 pieces of tier pretty early on, the 2 and 2 set is beating the 4 set. So Do with that what you will. Now, another question people are dying to know is, are we meta? Are we good? Are we in the trash? Well, it's not great, but it's not terrible. We're likely to be okay in raid and probably in the lower end of DPS because we're leaning into buff damage. If you play with good players, you'll be better. If you're not playing with good people, that means less buff damage and you'll probably be lower than some people might like. The spec is not a necessity in raid or in keys. So if you like it, you can play it, but if you don't like it, I don't think people are going to force you to swap off dev if you're playing dev or preservation to play Aug. So overall, without any more tuning, it's very middle of the pack unless you play well and you play with good people. Now, like I said, in keys, it's similar. If people you're buffing aren't dealing damage and you're not dealing damage, then nobody's dealing damage. So it'll probably play well in a coordinated group and suffer in pugs, which has tended to be the outcome for at least Chrono Aug through season 2. Scalecommander did okay on its own, but I played it when it was nuked all the way through its set of aura buffs, and I did good enough to hit 3.3, 3.4k IO. So I don't think it'll be as bad as it was when it was nuked, but you might be in queue for a little while. And I think that also plays into the fact that the community just generally doesn't like Aug or doesn't think Aug is good. They just have they're apprehensive to bring one to a group, even though that they haven't been bad for a while. And I don't think they're going to be bad in season 3. I think they're just going to be middle of the pack, and it's going to rely a little bit more on the group. So in pugs where you're not coordinating CDs and pulls, it might suffer, like I said, but if you're in a group with some friends and you can pull how you want to pull, then you might get some serious benefit out of it. So we'll see how it plays out. I don't think it'll be as bad as when it was nuked, but I don't think you're going to be auto invited into keys. So if you're trying to meta slave, I don't think that Aug is going to be for you just yet unless something changes. But if you enjoy Aug and you like playing Aug, then I don't see any reason why you can't play it. So overall, through some wonky tier set play of flying your squad into walls, RP walking during Eons, ignoring a 4-piece entirely, to memeing it with Green Aug in Dream of Springs, it seems we have settled now on Chronowarden buff machine Aug, leaning heavy into mastery and prioring our 4-piece in AoE while playing normally in single target. I think Aug is in an okay spot. It's not bottom of the barrel, but it's not sliding into the meta anytime soon unless we see some changes. I think we'll see some tuning after Race to Roll first, like we always do, and who knows, maybe we get some more love. But I'll be playing it regardless, and if you are an Aug enjoyer, make sure to subscribe for more Aug content. Till next time, guys.